Resveratrol is a polyphenol and it's abundant in red wine. It has some antioxidant and heart protective properties. However, its bioavailability is poor, and most of the purported benefits have not been confirmed in humans yet. Resveratrol is a small polyphenol, and it came to scientific attention during the 90s. Since then, it's been hyped by supplement manufacturers and news outlets. It's high in grape skins, as grapes produce the resveratrol in defense against toxins and parasites. Limited studies have explored its antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-aging, and phytoestrogen activity. Some of the benefits of resveratrol: it's an antioxidant, it may be anti-aging, it may activate detoxification genes, support brain and heart health, help to fight infections. It's safe when it's consumed from wine or foods. According to some clinical trials, resveratrol nose spray can improve the symptoms of hay fever or allergic rhinitis. Scientists came up with nose sprays as a great way to bypass resveratrol's poor bioavailability and to get it straight to localized problematic body areas. In one study on 100 people, an intranasal spray that contained 0.1% resveratrol reduced the nasal symptoms and improved the quality of life in adults with hay fevers who used it 3 times a day for 4 weeks. In another trial on 68 children with pollen-induced hay fever, an intranasal spray with resveratrol, 0.05%, and one other ingredient, beta-glucan, improved itching, sneezing, runny nose, and a nasal blockage. It was given 3 times a day for 2 months. Limited evidence suggests that red wine in moderation supports heart health. On the other hand, resveratrol supplements probably don't aid in heart disease prevention. Therefore, scientists think that other compounds in the red wine may be more important, while the resveratrol may or may not contribute to the effect. Additional large-scale studies are needed to determine the specific effect of different components in the red wine, especially in people with blood pressure and heart problems. In 67 men at high heart disease risk, alcohol-free red wine reduced blood pressure, both diastolic and systolic, after 4 weeks. It increased nitric oxide, which relaxes the blood vessels. Regular red wine also slightly reduced the blood pressure and increased nitric oxide, but less so than de-alcoholized wine. One analysis of 19 studies concluded that drinking 1 to 2 glasses of wine, 150 to 300 milliliters daily, reduces the heart disease risk. Interestingly, based on the first study, the alcohol in the red wine may actually reduce the beneficial effects of resveratrol and other polyphenols. This especially holds true for people who've already high blood pressure and are at risk. In healthy people, though, moderate intake of red wine may indeed improve the heart health. In a study of 80 healthy young people, a small amount of red wine, 100 milliliters per day, over 3 weeks, boosted the blood vessel health, the nitric oxide, and the number of cells that regenerate the blood vessels, the endothelial progenitor cells. Drinking water, beer, or vodka didn't achieve these effects. In cells, resveratrol increased the enzyme that makes nitric oxide, or nitric oxide synthase. According to animal and cellular studies, resveratrol also reduces the formation of plaques in the arteries, known as atherosclerosis. It also reduces the clumping of the platelets, reduces the blood lipids, and lowers inflammatory substances that can increase the risk of atherosclerosis. In cells, resveratrol increases the expression of the PON1 gene, and this reduces inflammation, and it helps to detoxify pesticides and drugs. Researchers are investigating the effects of resveratrol on liver disease and bile flow. Most clinical studies suggest that resveratrol is not beneficial for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. According to one analysis of 4 small clinical studies, resveratrol at 300 to 3000 milligrams per day, taken for 3 months, does not affect the liver enzymes, insulin resistance, or weight in patients with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. In animals, it prevented and improved conditions of obstructed bile flow. It also prevented liver damage in animals with sepsis or blood poisoning from serious infections. These effects remain to be explored in clinical studies. One study suggested that resveratrol helps with glucose metabolism. In 11 healthy but obese men, resveratrol at 150 mg a day increased insulin sensitivity and it lowered blood glucose levels after 30 days. However, additional clinical studies are lacking, therefore existing evidence doesn't support the use of resveratrol for lowering blood sugar. It also raised SIRT1 and PGC1-alpha levels. SIRT1 is an enzyme that's crucial for turning off harmful genes that increase fat deposits, blood sugar and inflammation in the body, while PGC1-alpha supports healthy mitochondria. Resveratrol lowered blood sugar in studies on rats with diabetes. It prompts cells to take in more sugar, and this reduces insulin resistance. Resveratrol also protects the insulin-secreting beta cells in the pancreas, and this helps to increase insulin when it's low and decrease it when it's too high. Scientists have yet to explore resveratrol's effect on insulin resistance and diabetes in humans. Despite some promising early findings, it's still uncertain whether the resveratrol can support healthy blood sugar control in people who are at risk of type 2 diabetes. According to one research team, resveratrol may help to balance the response to estrogen, which affects reproductive health in both men and women. In male rats, resveratrol increased testosterone and sperm count without any adverse effects. Scientists think it may accumulate in the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis that controls sex hormone release from the hypothalamus via the pituitary in the brain. In women, resveratrol may act in somewhat a different way. In one trial on 40 postmenopausal women, resveratrol at 1 gram per day for 3 months didn't affect the estrogen or the testosterone, but it increased the protein that binds sex hormones and carries them through the blood, sex hormone binding globulin, by 10%. It also improved estrogen metabolism, which may lower the risk of breast cancer. In animals, it blocks the enzyme that makes estrogen, called aromatase, and it mildly activates estrogen receptors. Resveratrol binds to estrogen receptors much weaker than estrogen does. This has a balancing effect. It can help to increase estrogen-like activity when the female sex hormone is low, like after the menopause, or decrease it when it's too high. Based on limited evidence, resveratrol may affect some hormonal and metabolic markers in postmenopausal women. In a clinical trial on 20 people with acne, a gel with resveratrol showed a positive result after 2 months. It reduced acne severity by almost 70%, and it improved overall skin health by over 50%, with no adverse effects. The team discovered that cosmetic products with resveratrol are stable and they don't degrade when they're kept in the fridge. Scientists believe resveratrol can have dual antioxidant activity as a direct antioxidant and as a compound that can increase other antioxidant enzymes, genes, and pathways. Antioxidant claims underlie many of the purported health benefits of the resveratrol. Based on this theory, oxidative stress and inflammation trigger or worsen numerous diseases, from heart disease to diabetes, cancer, and cognitive decline. Resveratrol increased the antioxidant enzymes in cellular and animal studies, including SOD and NRF2, which are crucial components of the detox hub and the antioxidant defense. Glutathione, heme oxygenase 1, which breaks down heme from hemoglobin to antioxidants and iron. Catalase, which protects from oxidative damage, and sirtuins and SIRT enzymes, which turn off aging-related genes and protect proteins. At the same time, limited studies suggest that resveratrol reduces free radicals and inflammatory substances. Aside from its indirect antioxidant effect on inflammation, resveratrol is theorized to affect specific inflammatory processes. For one, it may block the inflammatory COX enzyme, which also is the main target of commonly used painkillers and anti-inflammatory drugs, like non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. However, resveratrol's mechanism of anti-inflammatory potential hasn't been clinically confirmed yet. Scientists also believe that resveratrol blocks the following inflammatory players: the NF-kappa B pathway, which is one of the most important and deeply rooted triggers of inflammation in the body; HMGB1, a protein made by immune cells that causes inflammation and tissue damage in autoimmune diseases like arthritis; and STAT3, which can contribute to problems in people with chronic inflammation, autoimmune disease like irritable bowel disease, obesity, cancer, and a Th1 to Th17 dominance. Based on animal and cellular research, it's hypothesized that resveratrol can combat some age-related disorders, mimicking the effects of caloric restriction, which increases lifespan in animals, reducing oxidative stress and inflammation on multiple levels, like enzymes, immune cells, and gene expression, and activating SIRT1, which turns off genes that promote aging. One of the theories that scientists use to explain the aging involves so-called cellular senescence. With aging, cells become senescent and less resilient to stress. They lose their function and they start producing inflammatory substances. The loss of function and inflammation on a cellular level that extends to organs and tissues, the brain, the heart, muscle, skin, and the gut, and the body as a whole, also starts to degenerate and to lose function, especially if the body cannot or does not eliminate the dysfunctional cells through a process called autophagy. SIRT1 is an enzyme and it can turn off genes that trigger the cellular senescence. So scientists are wondering if by activating the SIRT1, resveratrol can epigenetically hinder the aging process. Autophagy is a normal process and it triggers the destruction of damaged cells, recycling the products of broken down cells to make new and healthy ones. Autophagy is the body's main quality control officer. Some theories have linked aging and age-related diseases to impaired autophagy, though these theories are still a topic of research and have yet to be confirmed or rejected. Autophagy theories have also led to a recent boom in calorie restriction. Caloric restriction is said to promote longevity and healthy aging by activating autophagy. However, caloric restriction isn't safe for everyone. It can be especially tricky for older or thin people who struggle to get enough nutrients in their diet. In animal studies, resveratrol confers similar benefits to caloric restriction and it increases autophagy induction without the need to reduce the daily caloric intake. These effects have not been investigated in humans yet though. Clinical studies are needed to determine whether or not the resveratrol can extend the lifespan of humans. Glial cells, specifically astrocytes, provide support and protection to neurons, and their damage or dysfunction is linked to many brain-related diseases. One of the ways in which astrocytes protect the neurons is by removing excess glutamate, a neurotransmitter, from the synapses and the extracellular space that surrounds the neurons. Excess glutamate in the brain can lead to excitotoxicity and ultimately to neuronal damage and even death. In a cellular study, resveratrol increased the glutamate uptake. Theoretically, this is linked to better protection from brain degeneration and stroke. In animal studies, resveratrol reduced seizures and it protected the hippocampus, the brain's main memory hub. It also increased insulin growth factor 1 in the hippocampus, which can improve cognition. One research group suggested that resveratrol can protect the brain by acting on the gut-brain axis. According to this unproven theory, resveratrol's potential benefit might not even depend on it being absorbed and passing the blood-brain barrier. In mice, the resveratrol stimulated gut nerves, which passed the signal onto the hippocampus. Resveratrol was undetected in the hippocampus, but it improved cognition by activating the nerves in the gut. In a study on brain cells, resveratrol increased the activity of the antioxidant gene heme oxygenase, and this protects the brain from damage. The effect was enhanced by melatonin. In mice with late-onset Alzheimer's disease, long-term resveratrol supplementation reduced the cognitive impairment and disease biomarkers. It could also activate AMPK, which maintains energy balance in the brain under challenging conditions. Nonetheless, clinical studies have not yet examined the effects of resveratrol on brain health. Some scientists believe the gut microbiome can protect against diseases of the arteries. In one study, resveratrol protected blood vessels in mice without APOE. It stopped harmful bacteria in their gut from secreting harmful oxidative substances, and it balanced their microbiome. It increased beneficial gut bacteria, which raised the production of bile acids. No clinical evidence supports the use of resveratrol in people who struggle with obesity. The existing animal research should be a guide for future studies, though. In mice who were fed a high-fat diet, the resveratrol reduced oxidative stress and it prevented the death of protective immune cells called Tregs. The resveratrol stopped fat cells from making new fats and it triggered their death in cell-based studies. It accomplishes this by turning off genes that cause weight gain, such as the PPAR gamma, while activating genes that enhance energy use and mitochondria health. Additionally, the resveratrol may boost the weight loss by blocking several key fat-creating enzymes. Stem cells in the connective tissue are presented with several possibilities to develop into fat cells, bone-building cells, joint or muscle cells. The resveratrol activates the fat-burning pathway, SIRT1, and this blocks genes that increase the fat storage, the PPAR gamma. This epigenetic shift causes stem cells to develop into bone-building cells, and this can boost the bone health. The effects of resveratrol on cancer prevention in humans are unknown. Scientists are investigating resveratrol for its potential to prevent cancer, especially liver cancer and some other type of cell cancers. In mice, resveratrol applied to the skin before UVB exposure prevented skin cancers. Given orally, it was active against esophageal cancer in rats. Since resveratrol is an antioxidant phytoestrogen, some scientists are investigating its effects on breast cancer. In cells, it blocks the enzyme aromatase, which makes estrogen. High activity of this enzyme and high estrogen level worsens the common type of breast cancer that has receptors for the estrogen. In animal studies, resveratrol prevented and reduced the growth of breast cancer. Clinical studies have not yet determined its efficacy and safety in breast cancer patients. Aside from its hormonal effects, scientists are wondering if the resveratrol can regulate another enzyme called topoisomerase II. In cells from a deadly brain tumor, a glioblastoma, resveratrol blocked the activity of this cancer enzyme. According to some unproven theories, resveratrol may increase muscle-building pathways and block processes that degrade proteins through proteolysis. For example, it increased the size of fish and it enhanced their muscle growth in one study. In another study, resveratrol supplementation enhanced the exercise training response, the upper muscle strength, and the aerobic performance in rats. In mice, high-dose resveratrol had a good anti-radiation effect. It prevented the decline in bone marrow and the white blood cells from radiation, helping to maintain proper immune function. It also increased the antioxidant and the detox enzyme SOD without causing adverse effects. Scientists have found that noise increases free radicals, and this can cause ear damage and hearing loss. In mice who were exposed to damaging noise, the resveratrol protected against hearing loss by neutralizing the free radicals and improving the blood flow in the ears. In a different rat study, the resveratrol prevented ear damage from the toxic chemotherapy drug cisplantin. Resveratrol has some virus-fighting action, according to cell-based and animal studies. It was effective against the herpes virus infection in ducks and geese. Viruses that cause both oral herpes, HSV1, and genital herpes, HSV2. The influenza virus, which causes the common cold, and the Epstein-Barr virus, which causes infectious mononucleosis. Viruses that cause lung infections, like respiratory syncytial virus and human metapneumonia and human rhinovirus. Its effect on the lung infection is enhanced in combination with quercetin. The virus that causes chickenpox, varicella zoster, and viruses linked to gut infections like enterovirus, and also the African swine fever virus. Resveratrol was researched against the Candida albicans yeast in a cell-based study. Resveratrol was active against MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, in bacterial samples from infected patients. Also against the ulcer-causing E. coli, acne-causing bacteria, STD-causing bacteria, and diarrhea-causing bacteria. Resveratrol alone, and by the SIRT1 activation, might increase the sensitivity to vitamin D. Resveratrol can activate the vitamin D receptor, which increases the response to vitamin D and its activity in the body. Resveratrol increases the binding of calcitriol to VDR, and it activates the retinoid receptor, which is crucial for the proper activity of vitamin D. Resveratrol is being researched for reducing pain and inflammation. In animal studies, resveratrol given directly into the brain reduced the sensitivity of pain. Its pain-relieving effects could be due to its ability to block COX-1 and COX-2 inflammatory enzyme, the same targets that are commonly used with the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory pain-killing drugs. Oral resveratrol also reduced pain and inflammation in mice, but injections had a stronger effect. While its oral bioavailability is still unclear, some people suggest a way to bypass this is to use resveratrol cream topically. Although resveratrol can penetrate the skin, it's unlikely the concentration present in most cosmetic products can have the effect, though. Resveratrol blocked the enzymes that take noradrenaline and serotonin back into the brain cells from neurons in rats' brains. This increases their concentration in the synapse. By increasing serotonin activity in the brain, resveratrol may boost mood. Resveratrol also blocks MAO, both MAOA and MAOB, enzymes that break down monoamine neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which is equally important for mood. Resveratrol blocks MAOA more than MAOB. MAOA is the warrior gene because some of its genetic variations are linked to increased violence and aggressiveness. This gene codes for the enzyme MAOA that breaks down neurotransmitters like noradrenaline, adrenaline, serotonin, and dopamine. High levels of this enzyme may imply fewer neurotransmitters available in the brain. This is because more neurotransmitters are being broken down at a faster rate. On the other hand, low levels of this enzyme may imply more neurotransmitters. MAOA balance is key. You don't want it to be too high or too low because situations may have negative effects. Based on this, some people claim that resveratrol is better suited for those who are predisposed to high MAO activity, as it blocks the enzyme and it can compensate for potentially low neurotransmitter levels. MAOB is similar to MAOA, but it plays a more important role in the risk of Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. Overactivity of this gene may lower the level of dopamine and other neurotransmitters in areas of the brain that are important for the onset of these diseases. Resveratrol also blocks the MAOB, but the effect is more modest. You may not have heard of mTOR, but it's one of the body's key regulators behind the scenes. This enzyme controls the activity of over 800 other proteins. Its expression is usually increased in times of plentiful nutrient intake and decreased in times of stress and calorie restriction. And while it does increase energy production, it also increases waste products and it reduces repair processes, including autophagy, all of which trigger autoimmune problems in the long run. Resveratrol blocks the mTOR signaling in a unique way. According to cell-based studies, an overactive mTOR has been linked to autoimmunity and cancer. While scientists are exploring whether reducing the mTOR activity may help to prevent the diseases while also promoting longevity. Clinical studies have yet to determine if the resveratrol affects the autoimmunity, the neurotransmitters, the pain, and the vitamin D sensitivity. Resveratrol is a polyphenol found mostly in grape skins and red wine. Some berries, legumes, and Japanese knotweed also contain it. Based on the available evidence, drinking the red wine in moderation possibly supports cardiovascular health, but taking resveratrol supplement doesn't. Its most promising use relies on applying specific formulations to localized body areas. For example, a nose spray with resveratrol may help with hay fever. Gels with resveratrol are being developed for improving acne. For more information about herbs, supplements, and natural treatments, check out my website.